South Africa's unemployment rate unexpectedly rose in the second quarter to the highest level since 2022, driven by job losses in the trade and agriculture sectors. The unemployment rate advanced to 33.5% in the 3 months through June, compared with 32.9% in the previous quarter. Data released by Statistics South Africa in the capital showed on Tuesday. Now, joining me for more on this is Professor Waldo Krugell, an economist from Northwest University. Thank you, Professor, for joining me today.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's a pleasure.
All right. Now, talking about that 33.5% unemployment rate, was that what you expected?
No, that increase was quite big. At the moment, we don't have a GDP number yet for the second quarter of the year. That only gets released early in September. But there was already some suspicion that the economy didn't do that well in the second quarter, and that probably translated into pressure on the labor market. But the size of this increase in unemployment, and specifically the job losses in the formal sector, came as a bit of a shock.
Right. Now, the corporates here are the trade and agriculture sectors. I'd like you to talk to us about the trends in those sectors and why we're seeing significant job losses in those sectors. I mean, trade and agriculture, one would have thought, I mean, this one should give us the good numbers.
Yes, and trade is domestic trade, so that's internal trade, and it also includes the hospitality sector. So those would be like restaurants, hotels, guest houses, those sectors. I think let's start on the agriculture side, just to say that typically the second quarter is not a very a high activity time. It's harvest time in the summer rainfall areas, so it is much quieter over the winter season than it is during summertime. So that's going to pick up a bit going forward. But the trade sector really was a disappointment, and I think it speaks to the pressure that South African consumers are under. Though inflation has been trending down, we've had really high rates of inflation like almost everywhere else, and interest rates are still high. So consumers have not been spending. We've got some positive numbers for July recently, but if you look at the second quarters, April, May, June, consumers were under pressure. That put the domestic trade sector under pressure, and we saw those really significant job losses.
Right, well, pardon my curiosity here, because I mean, looking at the median poll of economists, they sort of expected a moderate reduction from the previous quarter, but instead we have something that's higher. So talk to me, what are the factors beyond job losses in trade and agriculture led to what we're seeing right now in South Africa's unemployment rate?
I think economists were hoping that the suspension of load shedding is going to make a much bigger difference to economic activity and to employment. We've been without load shedding now for a number of months, and everybody thought that that's going to really cause a jump in economic activity and in firms hiring again, but it hasn't. It's a bit of a mystery why that is the case. A lot of us suspect that maybe firms were already using alternative green energy sources. So whether there was load shedding or not had a smaller impact than anticipated, which also then translates into a smaller jump when there's no load shedding. So it's difficult to say how much of this is a load shedding story and how much of this is uncertainty ahead of the election story. We had the elections at the end of May, and I think that also had an influence on firms really waiting for this uncertainty to dissipate before they stockpiled inventories again, before they started rolling out investment again. Even consumers maybe held back a little and said, we'll just get past the election and then we'll see where the economy is heading. So I think between those two factors, we really saw this sort of poor performance of both activity and the labor market side.
Right. I like how you brought in the whole election and all of that into it. So let's get right into it. With the unemployment rate now at 33.5%, what challenges, do you think the new government of national unity, will sort of face in fulfilling its pledge to prioritize job creation?
The key challenge really is to get the economy growing. The government on its own cannot sensibly create jobs. There are initiatives like the Presidential Employment Initiative that puts young people specifically into employment, but those are not really real and sustainable jobs. They are employment experiences being paid for by the taxpayer. They have value, but it's not the job creation we're looking for. For the private sector to create jobs, we need to get the economy growing. And there, the challenges are familiar. We need to keep the lights on. We need to get the trains going. We need to reduce crime. Those sort of big items that government and the private sector are wrestling with and collaborating on, those are going to be the issues that are going to determine the way forward during the course of this year and beyond. So I think that they have their work cut out for them. The challenge now is quick wins to convince investors, to convince consumers that they can start spending their money.
What are the quick wins for you?
I think the quick wins largely are on the Transnet and logistics sides of the story. Things are not going badly at Eskom at the moment. They've been keeping the lights on. And like I said, we haven't seen the bounce in economic activity that we would have liked, but at least that's going much better. On the logistics side, it looks like Transnet's going to open up for private sector partners by October, bid rounds for those. And hopefully that's going to just grease the wheels of everything that needs to get transported in bulk locally. And again, there are good initiatives underway. Once we start seeing results on those, I think it's really going to turn sentiment as well.
Right, just before we go, I'd like us to look at this particular one. I mean, the informal sector added 48,000 jobs in the second quarter of 2024. What does this say about the state of formal employment opportunities in the country? I'd like us to close on this.
I think formal employment opportunities have really been under pressure because the formal economy has been struggling. And we can tie that back to these supply side problems that I've mentioned. But I think linked to that is also the consumer under pressure. And hopefully we'll see less of that pressure once we'll be able to start cutting interest rates, also hopefully from September. And things are looking good for this. Inflation is trending down. And it seems also that inflation in the US is trending down. If they start cutting rates, it will be possible for our Reserve Bank to also relieve some of that pressure on consumers and give both consumers and businesses some room to breathe.
Right. Professor Waldo Krugell, economist, Northwest University, thank you for your time and your thoughts on Business Edge today.